Welcome to the Risk Wheelhouse, the podcast where we navigate the ever-changing seas of risk management and technology. Join your hosts, Ori Wellington and Sam Jones, as they steer you through the latest trends, insights, and strategies shaping the future of integrated risk management. Ready to chart a course towards success? Hop aboard and let's set sail into today's deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This week, we are really digging into a market signal that is just too big to ignore.
It's too strategic and, frankly, too expensive.
Absolutely. We're talking about ServiceNow's announced agreement to acquire Armis for just a staggering $7.75 billion.
And that's an all-cash transaction. It's expected to close in the second half of 2026, so we have some time, but the signal is now.
Right, and I think if you're a leader in risk management, in governance or compliance, you might be tempted to just file this away.
You'd see it as just another large cybersecurity deal.
Exactly. But that would be a fundamental misread of the situation, wouldn't it?
It really would. For anyone in integrated risk management, IRM, the sheer scale of this investment is a forcing function. It's not optional.
A forcing function for what, exactly?
It signals a really fundamental shift toward a unified operating model. We're talking about how to do risk management at scale, for real.
A mandate for unification. I like that. The core implication then for every risk leader listening is that this deal forces all of us to reevaluate what we accept as the standard.
The standard for continuous monitoring, for evidence, for everything.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're basing our strategic analysis entirely on the Wheelhouse Advisors IRM 50 On-Watch research note.
That's right. And to give you a bit of context, the analysis we're sharing today is drawn directly from that IRM 50 On-Watch research note. It's part of our ongoing research into how this market is evolving.
And we track this market using the IRM 50 vendor index.
We do. And it's probably worth just quickly defining what that is. Think of the index as Wheelhouse Advisors' curated list of vendors and service providers who are actively shaping the IRM market.
So it spans everything from GRC, ERM, or RM.
All of it. GRC, ERM, operational risk, technology risk management, even risk management consulting.
Mm-hmm.
We use this index to track momentum, to interpret market signals, just like this acquisition, and to anticipate where the capability shifts are headed over time.
And we should also note, as we often do, that ServiceNow is a vendor we've profiled pretty extensively.
We have, particularly in the recently published ERM Vendor Compass report.
So we've been watching how they're evolving their strategy in this whole enterprise risk context for a while now. And this acquisition, it feels like it just hits the accelerator.
It does more than that. It doesn't just accelerate their strategy, it repositions the entire target. I mean, this deal effectively defines the new price of admission for owning the real-time asset data you need to run modern risk operations.
Okay, let's unpack that. Our deep dive today is going to focus on three core strategic areas that are changing for you, the IRM buyer, because of this deal.
Okay.
First, we're going to explore that fundamental shift in how IRM models will be judged. We're talking about moving from relying on, say, artifact completeness,
which is the old way,
to demanding telemetry-informed closed-loop outcomes. Second, we'll analyze how this deal is a forcing function, how it raises the evaluation standards for continuous monitoring. We'll focus on the crucial layers of visibility, action, and verification.
Verification being the key one.
The most important one. And finally, we will leave you with three immediate, very practical actions that every IRM leader needs to take now in their 2026 procurement cycles to align their teams and their tech stack with these new standards.
Good. Let's get into it.
Let's start with the architecture that this whole thing implies. It seems to be all about the components that have to sit together on a single platform spine.
That's the core of it.
The Wheelhouse analysis points to three inseparable components for this to work at scale: intelligence, logic, and workflow.
Right.
So Armis and ServiceNow bring very distinct, but it sounds like perfectly complementary capabilities to the table. What does each side actually contribute here?
Okay, so we need to define their core missions. Armis, fundamentally, is an asset intelligence and exposure management business. That's their world.
So finding things.
Finding things with incredible detail. They specialize in high-fidelity discovery and tracking of assets across the entire modern distributed risk surface. That means your traditional IT, sure, but also the really tricky stuff.
Like OT, operational technology.
Exactly. OT in manufacturing or utilities, connected medical devices in a hospital. And that rapidly expanding and often totally unmanaged category of IoT class devices.
Your smart thermostats, your cameras.
All of it. Their value is the data. the data on what is there and what its risk state is right now.
And serving us. Now, on the other hand, they're the engine room.
They are the engine room. They are fundamentally a workflow and platform business. You could call them the operating system for enterprise operations. They manage the process flow, the accountability, the actual work being done.
So you fuse those two things together.
And when you fuse them, the resulting workflow is, well, it's seamless and it's continuous. It's designed to move entirely away from the old manual periodic processes.
So what does that target operating model look like in practice?
It looks like this. You continuously discover and classify all your assets. At the same time, you continuously quantify the exposure associated with those assets. And then, and this is the crucial part, you route the remediation and the verification tasks through standardized, accountable workflows.
And those workflows sit natively right alongside your normal IT and operational ticketing systems.
Natively. That's the key. No more swivel chairing between systems.
Okay. That sounds like a powerful technical improvement.
Yeah.
But the analysis argues it goes deeper, that it fundamentally changes the IRM judgment standard itself.
It has to.
If the technology shifts to this continuous loop, how does that change the criteria IRM programs are actually measured against?
It changes everything. It's a total paradigm shift because it operationalizes technology risk. It turns it into a direct, verified input stream into your enterprise assurance and resilience functions.
Okay.
Think about the historical benchmark. For the last, decade? IRM models have been judged primarily on artifact completeness.
Meaning, can you give an example of that?
Sure. It means asking questions like, do you have a risk register that's full? Is your control library fully documented? Have you completed all your risk assessments on time? Did you collect all your attestations from business owners?
Right. It's about process. Did we do the thing we said we would do?
Exactly. These are necessary clerical tasks. I'm not dismissing them, but they only demonstrate that the process was followed. They don't prove that risk was actually reduced.
And that's the classic check-the-box approach. It's the thing we've all been so frustrated with for years because it rewards activity over actual measurable outcomes.
Precisely. The new standard, which is driven by the capabilities implied by this unified architecture, it moves the judgment entirely toward closed-loop outcomes.
Okay, so the strategic question itself changes.
It shifts dramatically. It goes from, did you document the risk according to the policy, to, did you measurably reduce the exposure, and can you prove that reduction with objective third-party data?
And that's the core signal of this whole deal.
That's it. IRM is moving away from simple registers and attestations and toward genuine telemetry-informed management. The success of your risk program is now measured by the quantifiable reduction of risk exposure, not the volume of your documentation.
This is where it gets really strategic. The source material highlights the critical role of the TRM assets bridge technology risk management in this whole shift.
It's the foundation.
Asset intelligence isn't a new concept, though. So why does Armis's particular strength here make this acquisition so material for enterprise-wide IRM outcomes?
Because assets are the foundational layer of tech risk, and our existing tools have, frankly, failed spectacularly at managing the modern asset landscape.
You mean things like CMDBs?
Historically, yes, we relied on configuration management databases, CMDBs, to track our assets. But CMDBs have a critical flaw in the modern world. They rely heavily on agents or on manual input or on specific network protocols.
That just don't work in these weird, non-standard environments.
They don't. They don't function well in environments full of bespoke devices like OT, medical, or specialized IoT. So the fidelity of your asset data was always low, especially in your most critical high-risk environments.
So Armis comes in and strengthens that asset's integration point within TRM.
How? They do it by using passive network-level sensing to provide true high-fidelity data. And fidelity here means knowing precisely what exists, even those non-traditional devices, where it is, who owns it, and maybe most importantly, how it is behaving in real time.
That behavioral aspect is key.
It's critical. We all know that asset ambiguity, that gray area of unknown, unclassified, or constantly changing devices, is the root cause of weak assurance, of slow response times, and poor compliance. This acquisition is material because it attacks that ambiguity head-on.
So it's turning what was a security asset problem
into a genuine enterprise outcome improver.
Let's break down those consequences, because they matter all the way up to the C-suite. Let's start with resilience. If I'm running a global manufacturing company or a big healthcare system, why is high-fidelity asset intelligence now mandatory for my resilience program?
Well, think about a major manufacturing plant or a utility. You've got a huge volume of operational technology, OT, and industrial control systems.
Right, things that control physical processes.
Exactly. So if an unknown device is introduced onto that network, or an existing device suddenly changes its behavior in a way that suggests it's compromised or malfunctioning, that asset ambiguity translates directly into service disruption risk.
A real-world physical risk.
Absolutely. If you don't have real-time, high-fidelity intelligence on every single device connected to that network, from a smart thermostat to a PLC on the factory floor, your ability to respond to a threat is just fundamentally crippled.
Because you can't execute your business continuity plan effectively if you don't even know the full scope of what you're trying to restore or protect.
You can't. The continuous passive discovery that a tool like Armis provides is the necessary bedrock for any meaningful resilience program in today's distributed enterprise. You simply cannot manage the risk of service disruption if you don't know the full, continuously updated scope of your service components and their current exposure state.
Okay, and that ties directly into what's always been a huge pain point: assurance. If I can't prove the scope of my assets, then I can't really assure my controls are effective, can I?
And this is a massive time saver for assurance teams. Historically, assurance would spend an enormous amount of time just manually validating asset inventories before they could even start to audit control effectiveness.
Just trying to figure out what they're supposed to be auditing.
Exactly. And that time drain introduces delays, and it often means they're relying on dated or incomplete information. So if the platform provides this continuous, high-fidelity discovery and classification, it effectively short-circuits all that manual validation.
It gives them a trusted source of truth to start from.
It provides audit-grade evidence of what controls are operating on which assets. That lets the owner and his team move from a theoretical exercise to a provable operational state. They can focus their energy on systemic weaknesses rather than clerical validation.
So it's not just about making the security team happier. It's genuinely making the audit team more effective.
Precisely. And that leads us straight into compliance. Because regulatory requirements, especially in highly interconnected sectors like finance, healthcare, critical infrastructure, they are demanding proof of operation, not just proof of policy.
They want to see the evidence trail, the receipts.
They absolutely want to see the receipts. Regulated environments are increasingly demanding demonstrable control operation, not just the existence of a policy document or an attested register entry.
And this acquisition, by tightening that loop between asset intelligence and verified remediation,
it provides the specific mechanism to generate that continuous demonstrable evidence. It's the difference between saying, we have a policy that all critical OT assets must be segmented, and actually showing verified evidence that says, asset X was found to be outside the segmentation zone at 9:55 a.m., a ticket was created, the segmentation policy was automatically enforced by the network tool at 10:00 a.m., and a subsequent scan verified the correction at 10:05 a.m.
That's a completely different conversation with a regulator.
It fundamentally changes the compliance conversation. It moves from belief to proof.
So the first strategic signal is crystal clear. The unification of high-fidelity intelligence and high-velocity workflow forces a market transition, a transition where IRM success is now defined by measurable outcomes and audit-grade evidence, not just the volume of documentation.
The game has changed.
Let's move to the second major implication then. This idea that the deal acts as a forcing function around our standards for continuous monitoring.
Yes.
The public rationale for a $7.75 billion price tag describes creating a unified end-to-end exposure and operations stack that can, quote, see, decide, act.
And that simple phrase, see, decide, act, is really the core evaluation criteria for the next generation of IRM systems.
And it also highlights where almost every legacy IRM implementation currently stalls out.
Completely stalls out. Most organizations today are pretty competent at the C phase. They can collect data, they have vulnerability scanners, they have monitoring tools, now maybe they have high-fidelity asset discovery, they can see things.
But the next two steps, decide and act, that's where it gets manual, slow, inconsistent.
That's the failure gap, the decide phase, prioritizing the signal, applying enterprise risk tolerance and policy logic, routing it to the single correct owner. That is so often a manual meeting or a spreadsheet exercise.
And the act and verify loop.
That closed loop is exceptionally rare in current IRM environments. This acquisition is forcing buyers to raise their evaluation standards. They have to insist on the completion of that full loop. It cannot be optional anymore.
Okay, so if we are raising the standard for continuous monitoring, The analysis argues it needs to be assessed in three distinct, non-negotiable layers. Let's break down those new minimum requirements for buyers, especially as they're planning for 2026.
This three-part assessment framework, visibility, action, and verification, it's the new credibility threshold for any vendor in this space.
So first, visibility.
This is the foundation, the price of entry. You have to demand continuous discovery, classification, and real-time exposure scoring across all your asset classes: IT, OT, IoT, medical, cloud with high fidelity. If your current vendor can't tell you precisely what exists and what its risk state is right now, they fail this foundational layer, period.
Okay, second layer, action. This is where the platform's core workflow engine, in ServiceNow's case, really comes into play.
Exactly. Action requires prioritized routing into remediation workflows with clear ownership. Who has to fix this? By when? It needs firm service-level agreements, SLAs, attached. It means the intelligence layer must automatically feed the operational task engine.
So a critical risk signal doesn't just sit in someone's inbox.
Right. It immediately becomes an accountable, tracked assignment. This is what moves risk from a pretty dashboard into the actual operational rhythm of the business.
And finally, the highest threshold, verification. You said this is what distinguishes true risk management from just advanced ticketing.
Verification is the crucial difference, and it's the part most vendors really struggle with. It requires concrete, auditable, proof-real evidence that remediation actually occurred.
Not just that a ticket was closed.
No. Evidence that controls are operating as intended and a measurable outcome. Specifically, that the residual exposure is measured, scored, and trended downwards over time. A legacy GRC tool might track that a ticket was closed. That's action. The new standard demands proof that the risk was reduced. That's verification.
So if a vendor can only provide the first two layers, visibility and action,
they're not meeting the new credibility threshold that's being established by a platform that owns both the intelligence and the workflow.
this is where the analysis gets really interesting because it connects this closed-loop model to the future of AI.
It does.
ServiceNow is positioning itself as an AI-era control hub. It's connecting that discovery and prioritization with automated response, which aligns with the rise of agent-assisted operations in risk management. This is signal 4 in the research note. On the surface, it sounds like the promise of total efficiency.
It is the dream of efficiency, absolutely. But we need to introduce a heavy dose of critical caution here. Automation is coming, it will be powerful, but IRM leaders have to be clear-eyed about the fact that automation without validation risks creating faster, more expensive noise.
That is a powerful phrase. Let's explore that. What does faster, more expensive noise look like in practice for, say, a CSO?
Okay, imagine an automated system. It ingests a flood of new vulnerability signals after a big scan. The system is hyper-efficient, and it automatically prioritizes and routes 10,000 tickets to various IT teams inside of an hour.
That's fast action.
It's incredibly fast. But what if those tickets are based on incomplete asset data? Or what if the prioritization logic mistakenly classifies a low-risk bug on a non-critical server as urgent?
You've just flooded your high-value remediation teams with useless work.
You've successfully scaled inefficiency. And it gets worse. What if the automated fix fails? Or it causes a cascading service interruption because the platform didn't verify the change against the business service map? Now you've created a far more expensive problem, much faster than any human ever could have.
So the differentiator isn't just the speed, it's the auditability and the safety of that speed.
Absolutely. The differentiator in IRM terms, the thing that separates a successful program from one heading for a failure wave, will be whether those agent-assisted workflows produce an audit-grade trail. This is non-negotiable for fiduciary duty.
And there are specific components you need to demand in that audit trail.
4 of them, yes.
Okay, let's detail the 4 required components for a truly auditable workflow. First, signal provenance.
Provenance means traceability. You have to know precisely what piece of telemetry was detected, who detected it, which sensor, which Armis engine, which cloud tool, and exactly when the detection occurred. If the origin of the exposure data is ambiguous or locked in a proprietary format, the entire workflow built on it is questionable.
Okay. Secondly, decision logic. This gets at that black box concern we often hear about automated prioritization.
This is where we interrogate the decide step. Why was this signal prioritized? Why did the system decide this exposure needed immediate action before that one? You need a transparent map back to the policies, the risk thresholds, the business criticality scores that triggered the decision.
Even if an AI model made the call.
Especially then. The factors considered by that model must be recorded and auditable. Without this, you can't defend your remediation prioritization to the board or to a regulator.
Third, the action taken. This tracks the operational consequence.
Right. You need an explicit record of what change was attempted, who owned the ticket, who approved the change, which is critical for high-risk or OT environments, and you need documentation of any exceptions that were granted to bypass remediation. This maintains human accountability, even within automated systems.
The action has to be traceable back to the decision.
It has to be. And finally, we circle back to the highest standard, verification.
What confirms effectiveness, and for how long?
That's the question. Did the exposure score actually drop? Did the control state change from deficient to operating? Was the asset patched? And this is key. Was that patch verified by an independent scan or a secondary control system? And is there evidence retention to prove the fix held over time?
That full 4-part auditable trail.
That's the minimum differentiator when you're evaluating agent-assisted risk operations. Anything less and you are scaling chaos, not management.
Let's talk about the strategic market implication here, Signal 5. You don't spend $7.75 billion by accident. It signals a major shift in how platform advantage is even built.
It does. The sheer scale of this deal signals a profound belief among the largest software companies. The belief is that durable platform advantage will increasingly come from owning high-value, primary source risk telemetry and context.
Not just integrating with third-party data or adding another modular risk application.
Exactly. The value is migrating to the source of truth for asset reality.
That's a bold claim, and it raises a critical question. If owning the telemetry becomes the new advantage, what are the specific consequences for IRM buyers who rely on a best-of-breed security stack?
It implies 3 major consequences you have to plan for immediately. First, consolidation. You should expect more acquisitions focused on exposure management and asset intelligence by other major platform vendors who suddenly realize they're missing this foundational layer.
They see the writing on the wall. Second, this increases what the research note calls platform gravity. What do you mean by that?
Platform gravity means you get these tighter native experiences, and that offers undeniable efficiency for users, a seamless flow from discovery to ticket. But it creates much higher switching costs down the road.
The lock-in risk.
That's the one. If the critical asset telemetry is deeply embedded within a specific vendor's proprietary data model, extracting that context and taking it to a competitor becomes increasingly difficult and expensive. You have to be aware of the long-term lock-in potential inherent in buying a unified platform.
And that's a key piece of skepticism that IRM leaders have to carry with them, right? The efficiency of a unified stack versus the strategic risk of vendor lock-in.
Absolutely. And the third consequence is the direct pressure on you, the buyer, to decide where your system of record for risk signals is going to live.
What do you mean by that?
You can no longer afford to have 5 different dashboards tracking 5 different types of assets with varying levels of fidelity. The future IRM architecture demands unification of these signals, and this deal forces a strategic decision on which vendor is best positioned and most trustworthy to house that unified record, that single source of truth that tracks asset reality, exposure, and verified reduction.
Are you ready to see risk management in action? At Wheelhouse Advisors, we've launched a new YouTube channel dedicated to integrated risk management. You'll find quick explainers, insights from our IRM Navigator research reports, highlights from the Risk Journal, and conversations from the Risk Wheelhouse podcast. We're covering the topics that matter most to executives and risk leaders, from AI governance and cyber insurance to operational resilience and regulatory change. Every video is designed to help you anticipate risks, adapt with confidence, and build resilience in a digital-first world. In our first video, we explain how ISO 42001, the EU AI Act, and the NIST AI Risk Management Framework can work together as a unified playbook for AI risk. Subscribe today at youtube.com/@wheelhouseadv and get the latest insights delivered directly to you. That's youtube.com/@wheelhouseadv. Subscribe now and stay ahead of the risks that matter most.
We've established that the standard has fundamentally changed, both in how we measure success and what technology capabilities we should now demand. So let's pivot to the actionable side.
Okay.
If you're an IRM leader, you're starting to plan today, you're gearing up for major 2026 procurement cycles. What are the 3 immediate non-negotiable actions you should take to adjust your evaluation standards?
The market has shifted toward verifiable outcomes, so
Yeah.
your RFP criteria have to shift with it. It's that simple.
Okay, action 1.
First action, rewrite your outcome metrics. You have to stop rewarding activity and start measuring verifiable performance. This is probably the hardest psychological shift for legacy GRC teams.
Let's detail that. What's an old metric and what's the new performance standard we should be demanding instead?
Old metrics are passive completion metrics. Things like percentage of controls documented, number of GRC training hours completed, number of risk assessments initiated. They are administrative measures.
They measure busyness.
They do. The new standard requires active operational performance metrics that are tied directly to the telemetry.
Can you give me 3 examples of these new outcome-based metrics?
Sure, they look like this. Time to discover unknown assets. For example, how quickly did the platform identify a newly deployed IoT device on the network? Another is mean time to mitigate a high-risk vulnerability across a specific critical asset class.
Yeah, and the third.
The most important one, the quantifiable reduction in exposure by critical asset class trended quarterly. This measures the verifiable impact of your IRM program on the enterprise risk profile, not just the volume of its bureaucratic output. This is data the board can actually trust.
Okay. The second action addresses the evaluation process itself. It's about demanding verified outcomes during the proof of value, or POV.
Right, you must insist on closed-loop demonstrations. We need to retire the era of looking at simple dashboard screenshots or generic process flow diagrams during vendor evaluations. The new POV requirement has to be operational.
And sure. So what does a successful modern closed-loop POV scenario actually look like?
It has to start with a real exposure signal, maybe a known critical vulnerability on a newly discovered unmanaged OT device. Then, the scenario must demonstrate the signal intake, the prioritization logic based on business service context, the automatic routing and actioning of the remediation task, and, critically, it must end with the verified remediation and the explicit evidence artifacts that prove the fix was effective and the exposure score dropped.
And a vendor can't show that whole loop.
If a vendor cannot demonstrate the entire loop, from discovery to verified fix, using audit-grade evidence, they are not meeting the new standard. I don't care what their marketing materials say. This is the only way to separate platform promises from operational reality.
And the third action addresses that long-term strategic risk of vendor lock-in and platform gravity we talked about. Explicitly testing for openness.
This is so crucial, especially for organizations with deep investments in best-of-breed security tools. You need to test openness explicitly. You have to validate that integrations remain first-class citizens, even as these platforms naturally want to tighten their native experiences.
And this means going far beyond just checking for a simple API connection.
Far beyond. You need to ask the tough questions.
Like what? What are those tough questions?
Ask for assurances on data portability. Demand to know the friction involved in pulling that high-fidelity asset context out of the platform and feeding it into a competing risk engine or an existing specialized tool, like a dedicated GRC system or a specialized vulnerability management solution.
You're testing to see if the data can leave.
You need to ensure that the core risk data models do not become proprietary choke points that lock you into one vendor for critical risk context. Remember that $7.75 billion valuation is a bet on owning that data. You need a strategy to retain control of it.
These 3 actions, they all seem to point back to the same necessity, linking the abstract world of risk documentation back to the concrete, measurable reality of enterprise assets and workflows.
And that leads directly to the core value unlock of IRM. You must anchor technology signals to business service context. Asset intelligence, even high-fidelity intelligence from Armis, is just data. It's noise until it can be translated into language the business actually cares about.
The true IRM value only appears when asset exposure is translated into service impact.
And used to drive decision prioritization. That's it.
Give us a quick example of that translation.
Okay. If your platform flags a vulnerability on 500 servers, that's interesting data. But if your platform can instantaneously translate that into 200 of these servers directly support the core payment processing service, and the other 300 support the internal employee benefit portal, well,
The prioritization decision is instantly obvious.
it's obvious. Which exposed device threatens the company's revenue stream? Which unknown OT asset could shut down the supply chain? That service context mapping is what justifies the entire IRM investment. It's what allows you to move beyond simply managing technology risk to actually managing enterprise resilience.
Let's close this section by looking forward a bit. This deal isn't just retrospective. It informs immediate future market movements. So based on this acquisition, what market forecast is now highly probable?
The research note projects a high probability, about 55% within the next 6 to 12 months, that IRM buyers are going to elevate continuous verification to a formal mandatory RFP requirement.
And that's driven by all these new complex asset classes.
Exactly. It's driven by the undeniable rise of OT, IoT, generative AI infrastructure, and all the unmanaged asset exposure concerns that come with them.
And what's the resulting strategic change for the vendor landscape?
The vendor shortlists are going to narrow dramatically. They will start to focus exclusively on platforms that can prove closed-loop remediation, plus audit-grade evidence trails across at least one high-value use case, like OT asset protection or cloud posture management.
So the window for offering just a partial solution.
Just discovery or just ticketing. That window is closing, and it's closing rapidly. The market demands proof of outcome.
This truly feels like a dividing line for the entire IRM market. There's a pre-Armis reality and a post-Armis reality. The strategic message is that integration and outcome verification are no longer optional extras.
It is a dividing line. The sheer scale of the investment is the signal. It tells us that risk management at scale requires the unification of intelligence and workflow. The time for siloed, artifact-based IRM programs is officially over.
This acquisition of Armis by ServiceNow, then, is fundamentally about closing the loop. The necessary and, frankly, long overdue loop between asset reality and workflow action.
That's right.
The future of IRM evaluation standards, it rests entirely on demanding verifiable, closed-loop outcomes and having the audit-grade evidence to back them all up.
And while the immediate focus is on achieving this automation and efficiency, we have to look further down the road at the long-term risks. Our long-term forecast suggests a non-trivial risk, about a 40% probability in the 18 to 30-month time frame of a wave of automation without validation failures.
And this is that risk of scaling inefficiency we discussed. Organizations aggressively ingest more signals, they create more tickets, they automate more fixes, but they ultimately fail to show any measurable, sustained exposure reduction.
Or maintain control effectiveness. They automate the noise, not the value. And that is the real threat of the AI and automation era.
So what's the necessary countermeasure?
IRM leaders must proactively introduce formal guardrails for agent-assisted workflows, and they need to do it right now. This means embedding mandatory verification gates at the end of every automated action. It means defining clear approval thresholds for certain high-risk automated actions, especially in OT environments.
And establishing strict evidence retention standards.
Strict standards and implementing exception handling processes that require a human review before the loop is ever considered truly closed.
That's the final thought we really want to leave you with. The power of AI in automation and risk management is immense, but the diligence of validation has to be non-negotiable. If you automate a fix, you must automate the proof of that fix.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot today regarding the strategic implications of this deal for your IRM strategy and for your procurement cycles. This deep dive, along with the full analysis on vendor momentum and capability shifts, comes directly from our IRM 50 OnWatch research note.
You can access this full note and all of our other IRM 50 research insights on our research platform. Just head over to the RTJ Bridge by subscribing at rtj-j-bridge.com. That's rtj-bridge.com. Get the research that helps you define your standards and make informed decisions before your 2026 technology plans get locked in place.
We look forward to continuing this discussion with you on the bridge.
We'll see you there.
That wraps up another episode of the Risk Wheelhouse. Thank you for spending time with us at Wheelhouse Advisors today. We hope you found the conversation insightful and actionable for your organization's risk strategies. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis and thought leadership on risk technology, be sure to visit the Risk Tech Journal at therisktechjournal.com. It's your go-to source for comprehensive articles, expert interviews, and the latest trends shaping the industry. Subscribe today to stay informed. For any inquiries or feedback, please contact us directly at info@wheelhouseadvisors.com or feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and x.com and share your thoughts or suggestions for future topics. Visit wheelhouseadvisors.com for more information and resources. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, navigate wisely.